As many of you know, I just got out of jail, and now it's time to set the record straight. Yes, I was arrested on Tuesday morning as I was preparing to board a jet.
Heavy D Sparks wasn't running, hiding, or doing anything dramatic. He was just a guy heading toward his gate, backpack on, ticket in hand, when U.S. Marshals walked up, grabbed his arms, and put him in cuffs. People staring had no idea who he was, but Heavy D knew exactly what this meant, because in that moment, it felt like they took everything. Within minutes, the internet exploded with one question: what really happened to Heavy D Sparks? Why was a reality TV star being hauled away over something that wasn't even a criminal charge? Why did a federal judge finally snap after years of warnings? And what pushed Heavy D to risk jail time instead of doing what the court demanded? He spent 3 days locked up, 2 of them in solitary, and when he walked out, he said the full truth would shock people, because this wasn't about diesel trucks or a broken rule. It was about a line he refused to cross, a fight he believes wasn't fair, and a decision that turned into a federal showdown that almost cost him his entire life's work. This is where he admits it felt like they took everything, and the reason behind it hits way harder when you watch the full video. The morning of October 7th, 2025 started normally for Heavy D Sparks. He walked through Salt Lake City International Airport with a ticket in hand, ready to board his flight like any other business trip. But just as he reached his gate, everything changed. U.S. Marshals approached him, called his name, and within seconds, the Diesel Brothers star was surrounded. Passengers watched in confusion as the man known for rebuilding monster trucks was placed in handcuffs and escorted away. There was no outburst, no argument, and no dramatic scene. Heavy D didn't fight it. He kept his head down as officers led him out of the terminal and into a waiting patrol vehicle. People pulled out their phones, trying to understand why a TV personality, someone they had watched for years, was suddenly in custody. The charge wasn't violent. It wasn't even criminal. It was civil contempt, a label that confused most of his fans. If it wasn't crime-related, then why was he being arrested at an airport? Why did the court care enough to send marshals instead of issuing another warning? And why did it get to a point where a bench warrant was the only option? As news spread online, rumors started immediately. Some said it was tied to a business deal. Others insisted it had something to do with a past lawsuit. But the real reason was far more complicated and much older than anyone realized, because to understand why Heavy D was taken away that day, you have to know what led the court to that breaking point. And that trail starts years earlier, with deadlines, documents, and a legal battle he refused to give into. But what pushed the court to finally snap? After Heavy D airport arrest made headlines, people finally learned what triggered it: documents. Not a crime, not a violent act paperwork. For months, the court had ordered Heavy D to submit detailed financial records so they could determine whether he truly couldn't pay the massive attorney fees he owed. It wasn't optional. It was a direct court order with a clear deadline. But those deadlines passed. Then the extensions passed. Then the warnings came. Judges don't issue arrest warrants on a whim, and they certainly don't send U.S. Marshals unless they have exhausted every other option. In this case, the court felt Heavy D was ignoring them. He submitted partial documents, delayed key disclosures, and argued that the demands were excessive and unfair. Heavy D believed he had already paid everything that mattered: the government fines, the EPA penalties, the compliance costs, but the financial records tied to the attorney fees were something he refused to hand over without a fight. He saw the request as intrusive. The court saw it as obstruction, and that difference in perspective grew into a standoff neither side backed down from. Behind the scenes, judges and attorneys went back and forth for months. Heavy D insisted he wasn't hiding anything. The court insisted the law required full transparency. Every delay increased frustration. Every missed deadline tightened the pressure. Eventually, the judge reached the breaking point. If Heavy D wouldn't comply voluntarily, the court would force compliance, and that's when the bench warrant was signed. That simple act transformed a paperwork dispute into a headline-making arrest. But the missing documents were only a small piece of a much bigger story. To understand why the court was demanding so much information in the first place, you have to go back to where this all began. A lawsuit that started almost a decade earlier. And that lawsuit didn't just challenge Heavy D business. It challenged the entire Diesel Brothers identity. To understand why Heavy D Sparks ended up in a courtroom to begin with, you have to go back to 2017, the moment the Diesel Brothers went from reality TV stars to legal targets. That year, an environmental group called Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment took aim at Heavy D, Diesel Dave, and their companies. What started as viral entertainment online suddenly became the center of a federal lawsuit. The group claimed that Diesel Brothers builds weren't just loud, powerful trucks made for TV. They argued the vehicles had been altered to bypass emissions laws, making them illegal to sell or operate on public roads. The case focused on one thing: emissions deletes, removing or disabling diesel particulate filters and other systems that control harmful pollutants. Clips from their show trucks blowing massive clouds of smoke. Fans saw it as spectacle. Regulators saw it as evidence. And when health experts pointed out that Salt Lake Valley already struggled with dangerous smog levels, the pressure mounted fast. The lawsuit didn't just go after the businesses. It went after the Diesel Brothers' entire image, the culture of pushing limits, the videos of rolling coal, the off-road builds that looked suspiciously like daily drivers, and the bold personality Heavy D carried on screen. It wasn't just a case anymore, it was a fight over identity. Heavy D insisted the trucks were off-road only, but the environmental group argued that everyone watching knew people were driving them on city streets. That argument turned Diesel Brothers from entertainment into a test case for the Clean Air Act, and once the lawsuit officially landed in court, the situation escalated far beyond anything Heavy D expected. Years of hearings, inspections, and evidence piled up, and eventually, the Diesel Brothers found themselves facing penalties far steeper than they imagined. But the ruling that came next didn't just cost them money, it changed the entire direction of Heavy D life. After 3 years of legal battles, filings, inspections, and back-and-forth arguments, the Diesel Brothers finally got their answer in March 2020. Judge Robert Shelby delivered the ruling that Heavy D Sparks had spent years trying to avoid, and it hit much harder than anyone expected. The court didn't accept the claim that the builds were off-road only. They didn't accept the argument that the trucks were just showpieces. After reviewing the evidence, the judge ruled that Heavy D, Diesel Dave, and their companies had violated the Clean Air Act. Out of hundreds of alleged violations, about 20 were proven. It was far fewer than the lawsuit originally claimed, but it didn't matter. Even a single illegal modification is enough to break federal law. The judge ordered the Diesel Brothers to stop promoting or selling any trucks that failed to meet emission standards. Heavy D expected fines, restrictions, maybe even some bad press. But he wasn't prepared for the part that came next, a penalty that had nothing to do with trucks and everything to do with money. The court ruled that Heavy D and his companies had to pay $848,000 in attorney fees to the environmental group that filed the lawsuit. Not to the government, not to regulators, to the non-profit's lawyers. Heavy D was stunned. To him, the number felt extreme. To the court, it was justified. He later said it felt less like a punishment and more like being made an example. But whether he agreed with it or not didn't matter. The judgment was final. And when he appealed the ruling to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, hoping to get relief, things only got worse. In December 2021, the appeals court upheld the decision and described his actions as flagrant misconduct. The message was clear: Heavy D wasn't winning this fight. By then, the attorney fees had already grown to more than $928,000 with additional litigation costs. That pushed Heavy D to a decision that would lead directly to his arrest years later. He refused to pay. But why did he take such a huge risk? What made Heavy D draw a line in the sand? When the court ordered Heavy D Sparks to pay nearly $848,000 in attorney fees, he didn't hesitate with his answer. He wasn't paying. Not now, not later, not under any pressure. And that single decision transformed a legal loss into a personal war. Heavy D believed the fee wasn't fair. He said he had already paid everything that truly mattered: the government fines, the EPA penalties, the compliance requirements. But writing a check to an environmental group's lawyers? To him, that crossed a line. He saw it as rewarding the people who had spent years trying to tear down everything he built. He took his stance public. On Facebook, he told followers the fee award was unethical. On Instagram, he revealed he tried negotiating for a smaller settlement, but claimed the other side demanded full payment plus interest. Heavy D felt cornered. The environmental group felt entitled to the money, and the court believed the judgment was final. As months passed, the unpaid balance didn't disappear, it grew. Interest added pressure. Court orders became more urgent. Letters turned into warnings. Warnings turned into deadlines. The legal system wasn't asking anymore, it was demanding. But Heavy D stayed firm. Every refusal pushed the situation closer to a breaking point. To his supporters, he was standing up against a system that punished him far beyond his mistakes. To his critics, he was ignoring a lawful order and turning himself into a victim. In the judge's eyes, though, the issue was simple. Heavy D had an obligation, and he wasn't meeting it. The court didn't care about emotions, opinions, or online arguments. They cared about compliance. And once the deadlines passed for the final time, the court did the one thing Heavy D believed they wouldn't do. They prepared to force his hand. But how does refusing to pay a bill turn into jail time? Heavy D Sparks didn't get arrested because of the lawsuit itself. He got arrested because he refused to obey the court after the lawsuit ended. Once he rejected the attorney fee judgment, the court's next step was simple: prove you can't pay or pay what you owe. Heavy D did neither. Judge Shelby ordered him to submit full financial disclosures, bank records, business reports, income statements, and documents showing exactly what he could or couldn't afford. Heavy D turned in partial records. Some were incomplete. Some were missing entirely. Each time, the court said it wasn't enough. To the judge, this wasn't rebellion. It was defiance. By mid-2024, the court's patience had evaporated. After years of stalled negotiations and missed deadlines, Judge Shelby issued a formal order declaring Heavy D in civil contempt. Civil contempt sounds harmless, but it's one of the few areas where the court can legally take away someone's freedom until they comply. And that power is exactly what shifted the entire situation. Once the contempt ruling was in place, Heavy D was officially on borrowed time. If he didn't submit the missing documents, the judge could escalate the consequences at any moment. Weeks passed. Nothing changed, and when the court realized Heavy D still wasn't cooperating, they signed the piece of paper that changed everything: a bench warrant authorizing U.S. Marshals to take him into custody. That's why Marshals walked into the airport. Not because he committed a crime, but because the court believed it was the only way left to make him obey. For Heavy D, the message was brutal: ignore the court long enough, and the court will make sure you listen. But once he walked out of jail, Heavy D didn't apologize. He doubled down. 3 days after being released from Salt Lake County Jail, Heavy D Sparks did what he always does in a crisis: he grabbed a camera. No waiting for PR teams, no crafted statements, just Heavy D, looking exhausted but determined, recording a video he titled "The Untold Truth About My Arrest." Within hours, it spread everywhere. In the video, Heavy D didn't apologize or soften his stance. Instead, he explained that the arrest had nothing to do with pollution, diesel trucks, or environmental laws. He said it was about principle. He told viewers he had already paid the government, fixed the issues that caused the lawsuit, and made amends where it mattered. But paying hundreds of thousands to a group of lawyers? That, he said, was where he refused to back down. He described the arrest as a wake-up call, not because he feared jail, but because he finally understood how relentless the system could be. He spoke about the 3 days behind bars, including his time in solitary confinement, and how the silence hit him harder than anything in the outside world. Fans flooded the comments with support. They called him brave. They praised him for standing up to what he called a broken process. They said he shouldn't give lawyers a cent. But not everyone agreed. Environmental advocates pushed back instantly. They accused Heavy D of twisting the narrative, turning a simple court order into an emotional battle. They reminded the public that he had been found guilty years earlier and that the arrest happened only because he ignored the judge. To them, it wasn't bravery, it was deflection. None of that slowed Heavy D down. He promised a full documentary exposing the parts of the case he believed the court overlooked. He said he had evidence. He said he had receipts. And he made it clear that just because the court took 3 days of his time, they were never getting his silence. But Heavy D arrest wasn't his first controversy. And once you look at the battles he fought before this one, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Heavy D Sparks didn't suddenly stumble into controversy in 2025. Long before his arrest, there were signs that trouble had been following him for years, some public, some whispered, and some buried under bigger headlines. And when you look back, a pattern starts to appear. In 2019, Heavy D found himself locked in a surprising battle with Diesel SPA, the global fashion brand behind Diesel jeans. The company claimed his business name, Diesel Power Gear, sounded too close to their trademark and could confuse customers. Heavy D team fired back, saying a clothing company and a diesel truck empire had nothing in common. The case eventually faded out of the news. but it marked the beginning of a series of corporate clashes that followed him. Then came the controversy surrounding Nikola Corporation, during the company's rapid rise right before it collapsed under fraud allegations in 2020. Heavy D appeared in promotional content linked to Nikola's early trucks. When founder Trevor Milton was later convicted for misleading investors, critics tried dragging Heavy D into the conversation, even though he was never accused of any wrongdoing. For him, it was another reminder that fame can attach your name to disasters you didn't create. There were also tensions inside his own businesses. Former employees claimed there were issues with long hours, inconsistent paychecks, and a high-pressure environment. Nothing turned into a lawsuit, but the complaints surfaced in interviews and online forums. Heavy D brushed them off, saying the demands of custom builds and reality TV weren't for everyone. And of course, there was the question fans still argue about: how real was Diesel Brothers? Production insiders hinted that certain scenes were more planned than spontaneous. Not every repair happened the way the episode made it look. Heavy D never denied that editing shaped the show, but he insisted the builds, the work, and the brotherhood were real. Individually, none of these controversies were enough to derail his career. But together, they painted a picture of a man constantly walking the line between ambition and conflict. Someone who pushed boundaries, refused to back down, and rarely changed course even when the pressure escalated. But the biggest influence on Heavy D isn't found in lawsuits or TV edits. To understand why he fights so hard, you have to understand where he came from. Long before Heavy D Sparks was facing judges, lawsuits, or national headlines, he was just Dave Sparks, a kid from Utah surrounded by engines, grit, and a family that believed in hard work. Born on January 5, 1985, he grew up in a home where faith and discipline shaped everything. His parents were devout, determined, and committed to raising their children with structure. That foundation stayed with him long after the cameras showed up. At 19, he left the comfort of home to serve a Mormon mission in Bolivia. The streets, the language, the culture, all of it was different from anything he had known. But Heavy D adapted fast. He learned Spanish and Portuguese, pushed himself outside his comfort zone, and developed the confidence that later defined him on television. It was during those years that he began sharpening the stubborn mindset people would see again and again in his career, the one that refuses to back down. After returning home, he enrolled at Weber State University to study welding and mechanics. But one event changed everything. His father passed away unexpectedly, a loss that hit him harder than anything he had faced. That moment forced him to rethink his entire path. After just one semester, he walked away from school. Not because he failed, but because he saw a bigger opportunity and felt an urgency he couldn't ignore. He started an excavation business, building rock walls and waterfalls for clients. The jobs were tough, and the hours were brutal, but it taught him the value of building something with his own hands. It also confirmed what he already suspected: trucks weren't just a hobby, they were where he belonged. By 2008, he brought in his closest friend, David "Diesel Dave" Kiley. Together, they began flipping old diesel trucks, buying beat-up machines, restoring them into something powerful, and selling them to people who wanted more than a standard ride. Their chemistry was instant, their ideas were big, and their risk tolerance was even bigger. A year later, Heavy D married his longtime girlfriend Ashley Bennett, got his dealer's license, and launched dieseltrucks.com. The moves stacked quickly, each one pushing him further into the world he would eventually dominate. Then came the YouTube videos, short clips of wild builds, creative engine mods, and the kind of raw garage energy viewers couldn't find anywhere else. Their content spread fast. Before long, Heavy D was being recognized outside the diesel world. One of their clips even landed them a spot on Jay Leno's Tonight Show, a moment that changed their lives almost overnight. That appearance caught the attention of television producers. Soon after, Discovery came calling. And in early 2016, the Diesel Brothers stepped onto national screens loud, confident, and ready to turn their garage into a global brand. But what happened next wasn't luck. It was the result of everything Heavy D learned growing up: the losses, the grind, the mission, the stubbornness. And once the show launched, all of that momentum exploded. When Diesel Brothers premiered on Discovery Channel in early 2016, Heavy D Sparks wasn't just stepping into television, he was stepping into a spotlight that would redefine his entire life. The world suddenly saw what fans online already knew. Heavy D wasn't just a mechanic, He was a showman, a risk-taker, and a builder with a personality big enough to match the trucks he created. The show exploded almost instantly. Each episode blended monster builds, wild stunts, and the kind of energy only Heavy D and Diesel Dave could deliver. At its peak, the series drew more than 1 million weekly viewers, transforming a small-town Utah garage into one of the most recognizable diesel brands in the country. But the show's real power wasn't just entertainment, it was business. Heavy D and his crew built a machine with 3 major pillars: diesel sellers for custom builds and resales, diesel power gear for merchandise and giveaways, Sparks Motors as the creative workshop behind every insane project. They turned fans into customers, customers into superfans, and superfans into a nationwide community that wore their merch, watched their videos, and showed up to events just to see a truck start up and roar. The empire grew even bigger when Heavy D became a brand ambassador for major companies: Polaris, Ariat, BFG, Goodrich, New Holland, and others. His influence wasn't limited to TV. It stretched across social media, events, collaborations, and corporate partnerships. Then came Monster Jam. Heavy D didn't join the arena just to compete. He joined to dominate. From wild freestyle runs to jaw-dropping stunts, he delivered the same adrenaline-filled chaos that made him a TV star. He even racked up freestyle wins in 2019 and 2020, proving he could turn destruction into performance art. Every part of his career felt like momentum, always moving, always growing, always building something bigger. Fans saw him as unstoppable. Critics saw him as bold. And Heavy D lived like a man who genuinely believed nothing could slow him down. But behind the scenes, the lawsuits were piling up, the environmental battles were heating up, and the show that made him famous was about to feel the pressure. Because while Diesel Brothers was hitting its peak, the legal storm that started years earlier was closing in. At its height, Diesel Brothers looked invincible. The builds were bigger, the audience was loyal, and the brand seemed unstoppable. But by 2022, viewers noticed something strange. The uploads slowed, the episodes spread out, updates from Discovery became rare, and the once constant flow of truck giveaways and behind-the-scenes teases started fading without explanation. Discovery never officially said the show was canceled, but the silence spoke louder than any announcement. Behind the scenes, the legal pressure created a shadow over everything. The emissions lawsuit, the appeals, the growing attorney fees, it all became part of Heavy D public identity whether he wanted it or not, and major networks don't like controversy with no clear end date. Production insiders whispered that the company didn't want another PR battle on their hands. Others said the Diesel Brothers themselves were tired of the restrictions, the contracts, and the corporate control. Instead of fighting for another season, Heavy D and Diesel Dave shifted their focus. They started moving everything online where they controlled the schedule, the content, and the message. What they lost in production budget, they gained in freedom. Their YouTube uploads pulled millions of views, their giveaways continued. Their businesses didn't stop for a second. And even without new episodes on TV, the Diesel Brothers' name still carried weight. Fans stayed loyal, the community stayed active. Heavy D still had a massive platform anytime he wanted to speak. But the quiet end of the show raised a new question. If the Diesel Brothers' empire wasn't collapsing, then what did Heavy D really have to lose by refusing the court's demands? People assumed he was broke or running from the judgment, but the truth was very different. Because the man who refused to pay those attorney fees, he wasn't struggling. From the outside, some people assumed Heavy D Sparks refused to pay the attorney fees because he couldn't afford them. But once you look at his financial footprint, that rumor falls apart quickly. Heavy D didn't build his empire on a single income stream, he built it on several. Between Diesel Brothers paychecks, merchandise sales, brand partnerships, and YouTube revenue, Heavy D created a business ecosystem that kept growing even after the show slowed down. His YouTube channel alone has racked up more than 1 billion views, which translates into steady ad revenue and massive sponsorship opportunities. His social media presence pulls in millions more eyes across platforms, giving him leverage most influencers never reach. Then there are his companies: Diesel Sellers, Sparks Motors, and Diesel Power Gear. Each one generates income through custom builds, e-commerce drops, giveaways, and collaborations. Add in brand deals with Polaris, Ariat, BFG Goodrich, and New Holland, and Heavy D's financial base is far stronger than many expected. That's why most estimates put his net worth somewhere between $3 million and $5 million. Not billionaire money, but certainly enough to write a six-figure check if he wanted to. The $848,000 attorney fee judgment wouldn't have bankrupted him. It would have hurt, but it wouldn't have destroyed his life or his businesses. And that's what made his refusal so confusing. If money wasn't the issue, then what was? Why take the risk of contempt charges, arrests, and public backlash? Heavy D said it was about principle, not cash. But principle is a luxury, and Heavy D had enough money to stand on it. Still, even with financial stability, another question remained. Where does he go from here? Because refusing to pay wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new fight that could define the rest of his career. As of late October 2025, Heavy D Sparks is back home, back in his shop, and back on camera, but he's nowhere near done with this fight. He walked out of Salt Lake County Jail a free man, but not a finished story. His case is still open. The contempt ruling still hangs over him, and those attorney fees the court ordered him to pay, they haven't disappeared. Judge Shelby's patience is wearing thin. The court has made it clear that this won't be ignored forever. Heavy D has a few options left. He can pay the full fee, try to negotiate one last time, or refuse again and risk another arrest. And if you know anything about Heavy D's personality, you know that refusing isn't off the table. Instead of lying low, he went straight back to building trucks, running his businesses, and posting videos to millions of followers. His YouTube uploads carry the same energy as before, but now with a sharper edge. He talks openly about the system, the lawsuit, and the injustice he believes he's facing. His audience listens closely because they know he isn't hiding behind PR teams or corporate handlers. Heavy D speaks the way he builds, direct, unfiltered, and unapologetic. He's also teasing something bigger. A full documentary, he claims, will expose how the lawsuit was handled, how evidence was used, and how environmental groups allegedly profit from citizen-led enforcement. If he releases it, the reaction will be explosive. Supporters will rally behind him again. Critics will call it another distraction. And the debate will grow louder than ever. Today, Heavy D is still the same builder, the same risk-taker, the same stubborn force that turned a small-town garage into a national brand. But now, every move he makes carries more weight. Every post is watched. Every statement is dissected. And every delay in his case brings the possibility of another confrontation with the court. Some people see him as a hero standing up to a system they feel is out of control. Others see a man who broke the law, refused accountability, and is now trying to flip the narrative. The truth sits somewhere in between, and the next few months could decide how history remembers him. And that leads to the final question. After everything he's built, everything he's fought, and everything he's lost, where does Heavy D Sparks go from here? If you've watched this far, you already know Heavy D's story is nowhere near finished. The next chapter could clear his name or push him straight back into another showdown with the court. And the moment he drops that documentary, everything you think you know about this case might change overnight. So before that happens, make sure you're locked in. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us because when the truth finally drops, you'll want to be the first to see it. And if you want more deep dives into the untold stories behind your favorite reality TV legends, check out the video on your screen right now.